Hello guys and welcome back to the channel. So in this video we're going to talk about that Rocket Lab seemed to have lost out on the Amazon Kupier contract to Relativity space, or did it? So there's some whispers going around. I'm gonna show you some timeline. I'm gonna show you the exact whispers, and I'm going to show you what I think about this and how we should not be worried. So please make sure that you're subscribed to this channel if you're watching this. And I really want to give a shout out to the 20 channel members that I have who really help support the channel. And if you feel you got value out of this, please consider supporting the channel. The links are in the description below. So what happened? Tim Ellis posted on the 27th of August, flight hardware for Terran R is in full swing. More updates coming, over coming weeks. And continued big news and these eyes. And then somebody asked, are you guys going to beat Rocket Lab's Neutron? Rocket Lab Neutron, keep in mind, is supposed to fly in 2025. It was delayed from the end of 2024. The hot fire test is done. They're looking quite good for the 2025 target. And he writes, yes, LOL. I don't know why he has to write that LOL. And Peter Beck replied with this meme to that post. So the race is on. Then he posted this picture the day after. Time to take a look at Terran R's payload envelope, designed to strike the perfect balance of payload capacity, launch frequency, mass to orbit efficiency, fairing with humans for scale. Tim Ellis, humans for scale. The Terran R is optimized for the commercial satellite industry and ideal payload mass and volume. I don't know if you can spot this. There's something wrong with this picture. And then today I saw this article by Eric Berger, I don't know how you say his name. Fantastic space reporter, and he writes about the struggles of relativity. And we're just going to go through this article. So here we go. Relativity space has gone from printing money and rockets to doing what exactly? I would rather make that decision than pathologically hold on to something. So this is written like this because Relativity Space's differentiating niche was that they were going to 3D print rockets. And it looks like that was their whole, like Rocket Lab has the Electron, Firefly Space, they have this instantaneous launch for the military, and the niche, the reason why Relativity survived or existed or was created, it was to do 3D print everything on a rocket, and it looks like they're completely abandoning that concept. A splashy California-based launch company named Relativity Space shared a photo of sleek-looking rocket hardware on its social media channels last week. The image featured an impressively large payload fairing, which protects satellites on the ride into space. Time to take a look at Terran R's payload envelope, the company said, calling attention to three people standing to the left of the tall fairing. Such an anodyne post seems an unlikely candidate to spark an analysis of what is really happening at Relativity Space, but that's exactly what happened. Less than an hour after its publication, a source I've been talking to about Relativity for a while contracted me again. So they post a fairing, makes you think they have a fairing, right? This person said. A little digging into the photo revealed some interesting details. For example, the exit sign in the background is characteristic of those found in Europe rather than the United States. Soon it became clear that this photo was taken inside the fairing factory of a company called Beyond Gravity, formerly known as Rogue Space, which is based in Emmen, Switzerland. So this is the sign that he's talking about, and it does look European, I can confirm. And at the base of the fairing is a large white placard blocking a sign which apparently discloses that this hardware was built for Europe's Ariane 6 rocket. So he's talking about this, and they're covering that up. And yeah, let's go on. In fact, the only thing that can be confirmed to be related to Relativity Space in this photo is the man at the far left, Drew Hess, Senior Mission Management Official at Relativity. So I can, I understand startups have problems, and sometimes if you can buy and outsource some components, it saves capital in development, and maybe the fairing wasn't, didn't want the time, spend time and resources on this. But why the heck would you post it on your social media as a part of your rocket that is coming along nicely? It seems to be like this was a fairing that was over manufacturer left over from Ariane 6, and then they just bought it. And why would this be announced as big news coming about our rockets? So that's very sus to me. Let's continue. The public release of the photo suggestive of a payload fairing that Relativity built for its Terran R rocket, but which seems to be an Ariane 5 payload fairing manufactured many months ago, is confusing at best. Exactly. But this was a clarifying moment for me, as the photos release validated other information my source had been sharing in recent weeks. These documents, files, and comments raised a singular question: what the heck is going on at Relativity Space? A compelling origin story. A pair of talented aerospace engineers, Tim Ellis and Jordan No One, I'm pretty sure that's not how you're supposed to say the name, but Jordan No One, founded Relativity Space 9 years ago with the intent of using 3D printing to manufacture rockets. They left jobs at Blue Origin and SpaceX, believing they could accelerate the commercial launch revolution. Ellis took the role of chief executive, and he proved to be a prolific fundraiser. That is, by the way, someone has to be a good fundraiser if you own any kind of startup. And look at these numbers. By June 2021, the company had raised more than 1.3 billion, and its latest Series E funding round valued the company at 4.2 freaking billion dollars. So Rocket Lab, the company that has done 50 plus Electron launches, they have a whole space systems division. They have hot fire tested their Neutron Archimedes engine. They have a ton of infrastructure done in Wallops to, by every account, they seem to be moving really well with Archimedes development. That company is only worth a little bit north of $3 billion. And this company that has never been to space, who is supposed to 3D print rockets that they cannot actually do, is worth 4.2 billion. Doesn't make any sense. And by the way, it's Rocket Lab that is valued too low. I guess you already knew that from my prior videos. With this funding in hand, Ellis said Relativity could both execute its smaller Terran 1 rocket and develop the larger and ambitious Terran R booster to compete with the industry-leading Falcon 9 rocket. In March 2023, the company launched Terran 1 for the first time. This marked a significant achievement, flying a largely additively manufactured rocket with a novel methane-fueled engine. The first stage flew extremely well, exceeding the performance of most launch startups on their initial flight. However, there was a problem with a liquid oxygen pump during the second stage. As its Eon engine never achieved full thrust, the rocket was lost. Despite this considerable success, in the days after launch, I began to hear talk from various sources that Relativity intended to retire Terran 1. Additionally, these sources said the company was having difficulty with its 3D printing processes. So this company, you remember there was also beef before that Peter Beck said that a lot of rocket startups have fake contracts. So this company was boasting that they had like $1.8 billion. I don't, maybe it's 1.5, don't quote me on this number, but something like that backlog for its Terran 1. So if those backlogs were real and they were real contracts, why the heck would you abandon it after the first flight? So yeah. Another red flag there. In an interview a few weeks after Terran 1's debut, Ellis acknowledged that the Terran 1 was done and Relativity was pivoting fully to Terran R. He said the market opportunity for Terran R, intended to lift a staggering 33.5 metric tons in fully expandable mode, was way too great to pass up. And for 3D printing, Relativity had experienced some growing pains with issues like cracking. The company planned to lean heavily into 3D printing for engines and other parts of the Terran R rocket, but Ellis said he could no longer claim that the Terran R would be 90% additively manufactured. And that's where things remained for more than a year with relatively presumably heads down hard at work on bringing Terran R to the launch pad in 2026. That's only in 2026. And remember, this is a rocket program which can get delayed. That is until an insider began sending me documents highlighting Relativity's struggle to develop the Terran R rocket. Terran R or Ariane 6. Relativity Space first publicly discussed the Terran R rocket about 3 years ago. At the time, Ellis said it was intended to be fully reusable, with both the first and second stages making propulsive landings back on Earth. Relativity planned to use its additive manufacturing to print the vast majority of the vehicle. The original concept looked futuristic, not dissimilar to a smaller version of the SpaceX Starship rocket. Today, however, the Terran R rocket is starting to more closely resemble a traditional rocket developed by European Space Agency Ariane 64, which is Ariane 6 rocket with 4 solid rocket boosters. First, there is the commonality in payload fairings. After the company's social media post about the fairing, I interviewed Alice about what's going on with the Terran R rocket. Our intent wasn't to pass the fairing off as anything other than just a picture of showing the size of the fairing, Alice said. Yeah, a little bit sus there. We can't share details about this particular supplier because of contractual obligations, but everybody put the pieces together pretty quick. So yeah, the fairing in the image is indicative of a Terran R fairing and a fairing used for Ariane 64. But the similarities to Ariane do not stop there. Originally, the Terran R had a diameter of 18 feet, but this has since shrunk to 17 feet and 9 inches, 5.4 meters. This is exactly the same diameter as the Ariane rocket. That's because both the new payload fairing and the pressure domes inside the rocket that store its liquid oxygen and methane propellant. So these are the parts that they are outsourcing, and then they basically had to adopt the design of Ariane 6. Never heard any other rocket company do this. According to internal documents reviewed by ours, Relativity had difficulty printing pressure domes for the Terran R rocket. One of the documents references a large buckling event with a printed dome. As a result, Relativity seems likely to purchase these pressure domes from a European aerospace company. One of the keys to controlling costs in rocket development, at least in the United States, has been vertical integrations. Companies like SpaceX and Rocket Lab have been successful by producing many of their rockets in-house as many of their rocket parts in-house as possible. Previously, Relativity Space had sought to do things similarly by additively manufacturing most of its rockets. So they tried their whole founding concept, additive manufacturing, then it didn't work, and now they're like outsourcing to European suppliers. Pretty weird concept, if you ask me. But this new reliance on outside suppliers for major components is likely to drive up Terran R production costs. And there are other pain points as well, such as fees to ship the rocket across the country. The Terran R is much larger in diameter than the Falcon 9 rocket, which is 12 feet, so it cannot be transported by highway. Therefore, Relativity plans to assemble the rocket's first stage at its capacious factory in Long Beach, California. From there, according to the internal documents, Relativity will ship the rocket 4,450 miles by barge to Stennis Space Center in southern Mississippi via the Panama Canal. There, the stage will be hot fire tested before being shipped to a barge another 910 miles to Relativity's launch facilities at Cape Canaveral, Florida. The shipping cost to get the first stage to Florida and the barge back to Long Beach was at one point estimated to be as high as $3.45 million. So this is where you see where Rocket Lab tends to really shine, that they are taking care of everything around the rocket. So they didn't start with like, hey guys, we're going to 3D print the rocket, trust us bro, it's going to be amazing. They went into like, okay, what is the most needed size of the rocket? Okay, that's how they established the 17,500 kilos of payload capability for, or what was it, 15,000, sorry, it's late. But that's how they established their payload capability for Neutron. They made sure that they are at a launch pad that is not overbooked like the Cape Canaveral. They made sure that the factory is right by the launch pad where they assemble the rockets, so they don't have to transport it. And they were so good at engineering the costs out of also the infrastructure that surrounds the rocket. And clearly, Relativity is failing at this because 3.5 million just for the transporting the rocket to the rocket site is not cheap. Relativity betting it all on reuse. There is, of course, one big difference between the Terran R rocket and Ariane 6 booster. Relativity plans to recover and reuse the first stage. Second stage reuse plans have been dropped, whereas European rocket solid boosters and the entire vehicle is expendable. Ellis said reuse allows the company to amortize high shipping costs across many launches, and Relativity is planning to reuse Terran R many times. We're planning for at least 20 reuses of Terran R, Ellis said. A lot of things will get tested beyond 20 reuses, but 20 is what we're officially saying. Once you have that, even things like shipping costs are divided by quite a number of reuses, so actually that is a huge advantage. The first stage will use grid fins and passively deployed landing legs and is optimized to land at sea, but getting to rocket reuse is not easy. Exactly. So how much capital are they going to burn up? The thing is, there has not been a second startup or a second rocket company that achieved reusability. I think they're going to say it here that Falcon 9 took 7 years to achieve reusability. So are they going to be using expendable rockets for 3 point something million for shipping a pop? It's crazy. The first stage, sorry, here we go. So Ellis said, a lot of things will get tested beyond 20, but 20 is what we're officially saying. Once you do that, even things like shipping costs are divided by quite a number of reuses, so actually that is a huge advantage. The first stage will use grid fins and passively deployed landing legs and is optimized to land at sea, but getting to rocket reuse is not easy. With its Falcon 9, SpaceX needed 7 years from debut launch of the rocket to successful reuse of its first stage. The company did not reach a cadence of launching twice a month until the vehicle's 10th year of flight. And by the way, so Rocket Lab planned to launch 22 launches this year. We are in year for sure not 10. And we are close to this number twice a month. I mean, like, we're definitely averaging more than one a month, but we're not at 2 a month yet. So again, this just shows how well Rocket Lab is doing. The changes in Terran R's development, going from being predominantly 3D printed to looking much more like a traditional rocket and outsourcing components like fairings and domes, have been done in response to customer demand, Ellis said. Sure. How do we get into operation and scale as quickly as possible? Ellis said of the driving force behind the Terran R development, that's what solves the customer's problem. Right now, there is an undersupply, and it's not yet clear who's going to solve this undersupply problem in a big way. I have an idea who might solve it. I don't know if you guys heard of that company. In a private letter to investors, advisors, and friends, summarizing the company's operations after the first half of 2024, Relativity said it currently has a backlog of 2.6 billion in commercial launches and is in discussion or has signed a contract with many major mega constellation providers, but not SpaceX. Alice would not confirm, but multiple people have told ours that Relativity recently signed a deal for multiple launches with Amazon's Project Kuiper constellation. So there you have the rumor. I'm sorry that this video is getting super long. It's probably boring. Let me know in the comments if it is. But it was really important to give this historical background, and I think it was very important to read the article. I will tell you why in a bit. Alice is not wrong. There is considerable demand for medium and heavy lift launch vehicles with large fairings that can carry multiple satellites to space, particularly from Amazon. But this approach represents a huge shift from a launch company that was founded nearly 9 years ago to revolutionize the industry by printing rockets and rapidly iterating on the design. Now, Relativity Space is aiming to beat SpaceX, Blue Origin, Rocket Lab, and others in the same lane. While it was a very difficult decision to make, especially because that's literally been a lot of the DNA of the company and a lot of what we've talked about publicly, it was just a decision we had to make to be pragmatic and business focused. Ellis said about moving away from printing the majority of its Terran R vehicle, and I would rather make that decision than pathologically hold on to something that was just not going to work on the timeline. Relativity plans to unveil the new Terran R rocket during a presentation this fall, possibly sometime next month. That is going to be interesting. So kudos on, you gotta give credit where credit is due. So obviously, if you have raised a lot of money and you see that you're going to waste that money into doing something that is obviously not going to work, you need to pivot. But unfortunately, this pivot makes you, I think, one of the least competitive companies, because using parts of a super expensive European rocket where you're dependent on outside suppliers for scaling up your own launch, and then not making sure that your rocket infrastructure is in place, these are just bad signs for me. So we don't need to read the rest. Here's the thing. Here's my honest take on what I think has happened. Peter Beck is not giving discounts, and Amazon is desperately trying to get to space with its Kupier. I don't know why I can't say it. Kuiper constellation, and they are contracting anyone that has a pulse that is not SpaceX. So they contracted Ariane 6. They contracted the Vulcan, I believe, and now they're contracting Relativity. But what do you think Relativity had to offer to Amazon so that they get contracted on this next flight? That's right, probably huge discounts. And what does Amazon have to lose on this? Absolutely nothing, because if Relativity is not done in time, they will just find another company that is ready, and they will rebook the company to those launches without discounts. And if Relativity is ready, then they just manage to book very cheap launches very early. And yeah, maybe they lost 10% that they have to prepay when they sign the contract. But we can agree it's very low risk. So my guess is that Amazon and many other customers, just like it happened with, for example, Astra, that Astra's customer base went to different launch providers. They were supposed to launch the NASA Tropics. This ended up being launched by Rocket Lab. So I think Amazon is going to come knocking on Rocket Lab's door when Neutron is ready, and there will be no discounts. There will be fat money for Rocket Lab, and it's going to be amazing. And if you still have any doubts, I want to show you this clip from Andy Lapsa, who is the CEO of Stoke Space. I want to interview him one day. I think he has a very uphill battle as a company with Stoke Space, but I think he has very good viewpoints. He's very honest and very straight. Also about how hard it is for them to, he's not PRing their chances. But listen to this, and then we finish.
I think that the choke point on the industry is affordable access on a reasonable timeline. And one of the examples that I'll paint is that, if you go back and look at history of the OneWeb deployment, right? The OneWeb constellation deployment, they were there. They had the idea first. They had kind of a messy interaction with Elon early on, but they had satellites trying to get up to orbit, and they couldn't get them to orbit, right? They had procured launch from around the globe. They wrote very expensive contracts that they had to renegotiate. They sat on the ground for a long time. Ultimately, they used Falcon 9 to finish the deployment. But by the time they finished deployment, their initial satellites had already run out of service life. That's how long it took them to deploy. Okay. And now I would ask you, are those market dynamics different today for the next constellation that wants to go up? Is it different for Kuiper today? The answer is no. Kuiper wrote really expensive contracts with Ariane 6, with ULA's Vulcan, and with Blue Origin's New Glenn. How many times have those rockets flown?
Fair.
They were sued by their board, by their shareholders, because those contracts are way more expensive than the Falcon 9 commercial contracts. Now, if they want to go deploy on Falcon 9, good luck, man. It's a 2-year wait for a vehicle. Falcon 9 is going to prioritize Starlink. The next priority is the US government, and everything else is after that, right? So I would argue that nothing has changed, or very little has changed, right? So if you just look, if all you care about is deployment of telecom constellations, and if you accept that probably the end state of that industry is 2, maybe 3 global constellations, how is the second and the third one going to get up? It's not that much different than OneWeb was, 5+ years ago.
Yep.
So again, as usual, I think Peter Beck is focusing on the exact correct thing by finishing Neutron. And we can clearly see that there is a lot of demand for that class of rocket. And the first non-Falcon 9 rocket is going to make a lot of business. And Peter Beck is just heads down, focusing on developing the rocket, getting it to market. And it's very, very exciting to see. And I think this video was really good because, Relativity was is a potential competitor to Rocket Lab. And it's always good to know more about, the competitors to the business that you're invested in. Unfortunately, I don't think that they have a very good chance of making it. I will just leave it at that. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you got value out of it, please consider supporting the channel. The links are in the description box below. And I'll see you in the next video. Ciao, ciao.